Wish TV. All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app, bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecast, radar, and Indiana sports, all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.
And welcome to another episode of All Indiana Politics Conversations. I'm your host, Garrett Bergquist, the producer of All Indiana Politics. And joining us today is Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State, Lauri Shillings. Lauri, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Garrett.
So tell me about yourself. You say that you grew up on one of the oldest homesteads in Indiana?
Yeah, so our family settled there in 1824. It is in the northern half of Montgomery County, just below the Tippecanoe County line. And our family's been there ever since. My dad still lives on the family farm. So we've been there, I guess, if you count generations, I think it's called 10 generations at that point.
Tell me a little bit more about the homestead.
Well, it was founded there by a group of brothers, and those individuals had come from Ireland and settled here, traveled across Ohio, and then up and down the Mississippi before coming to Indiana. Really philanthropic. So at that time, really successful farmers. They had invested in the area, and really strangely, one of the stories is they were traveling down south in Tennessee, experienced some troubles, and someone helped them, and they said, well, we will donate to your family later on when we get to it. So there's an entire college named after us now called Meharry Medical College, which is my maiden name, Meharry.
All right. What are some things that growing up on that homestead taught you?
So that was a family home.
Okay. So
my grandparents lived there. I lived in Wingate with my parents, of course. But we would go out there all the time, and I'd help my grandmother with gardening. We had farm animals that we would care for, and my dad was self-employed out there, fixed and created farm equipment. So it was basically a really rural area, and that's the things that you did on the farm is you helped Grandma pick beans and can and do all the things that you would do.
What are some things that taught you?
Perseverance, preparation, a lot of those things, and that your area, your community is important. You really are invested in the roots of where you came from.
I understand that you're a small business owner. Tell me about your journey growing up and then becoming a small business owner and some of the challenges that you've faced there.
Right. So I have a lot of things covered underneath the Pirate Small Media umbrella. So a lot of that was just content creation. We did advertising. I do multimedia design for people, video work, graphic design, of course. And, over the course of time, I went back to college and got my web design degree and started focusing more on digital work. And then underneath that is also content creation for myself. And some of the things that taught me is that you really have to be super efficient. There's nobody coming to do it but you. And if you don't stay up the late hours to get it done, then it's probably not going to get done.
For our listeners who are not familiar, explain what the Libertarian Party stands for.
Libertarians want to let people govern themselves. We are tired of the government telling us how to live our life rather than allowing us to live our life. I guess in the 8-some years that I've been tabling, it has been the quick quip is if you're not hurting anybody and not taking their stuff, the government really shouldn't be involved. So we want to make sure that you are able to govern yourself at home. As long as you are not using force against others, then there should be no impedance to that.
What first drew you to the Libertarian Party?
Well, a lot of those things are, I kept seeing our current leadership in many functions of government, local, state, nationally, and I realized a lot of those individuals, not all of them, but a lot of them really weren't out to serve their community. They were doing it to either carry water for people in Washington, D.C. because they were told to. They were self-funding themselves or really weren't invested in doing the best things that they could for their local communities or constituents. And I realized that instead of just yelling into the wind about, hey, they're doing it wrong, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe I should stand up and be the person who is supposed to be doing something. So that's what brought me into the Libertarian Party, is their ideals tended to align more closely with what I wanted to see out of government leadership.
And I understand that you have some positions within the Libertarian Party right now that you hold?
Yeah, I have been the county chair of Hamilton County since 2020 and been involved in the state central committee for the state party as the 5th district representative since 2023.
You ran for Congress in 2024 in the 5th district. What are some things that taught you?
It taught me that you really do need a volunteer team. I started that really late in the campaign season, really close to the end of the filing deadline. I realized that if you're going to be running a full-fledged campaign, you really should be dedicated to it early, start laying the ground for your name recognition, start doing the work with individuals within your support group, and allow them to do their best work.
A lot of the candidates for Republican or Democratic parties, a lot of times they'll have a full campaign staff, that sort of thing. For you, you're kind of having to do a lot of that yourself. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Right. So we're a grassroots campaign. We don't have a whole lot of, we don't have any paid positions. Everyone is a volunteer. We tend to do things as efficiently as possible, much like how we would run the government. If you don't pay someone and they wish to volunteer, great. I love that. The other side of that coin is that I don't have big investors asking favors of me at the end, right? So usually if you have a large dollar donation, a lot of people are like, well, later down the line, there'll be favors or you'll be more accommodating to my ideas. I don't have that. So everybody that has donated to me, I can pretty much say, hey, you are a friend of mine. I can name you. I realize exactly who they are, and they're really supportive for us. Because, the state Secretary of State's office, this race is a 2% ballot access race, and we've overperformed since 1994. And I'm just hoping to continue that trend and do better, because this year, with 4 candidates, I think it's anybody's game. There's a lot of people dissatisfied with their current, I would say, incumbent kind of people coming on board for the left and the right. And then we have an independent who's crossed over from the other side, and from the Republican side. Let me clarify. So in the time that I've been out talking to individuals, the support for us has been immense. And they are really excited about having someone who's truly dedicated to working for the people of Indiana and not for any political party regime.
What led you to run for Secretary of State?
Well, twofold. One is the ballot access part of that. And the other is, election integrity. I ran for Congress because I could see that there were manipulations in Congress to support a presidential campaign regime where he wanted to get as much executive power as he could and stack the deck in the Republican way. And, short campaign, the results were what they were. In the Secretary of State's race, the other part of that is election integrity, where even now, like our current Secretary of State was the first one in the nation to give our voter rolls to the federal government without even considering the privacy issues that would come along with that. Or what those end goal results were for that. As Indiana State is sovereign. We should be able to administer our elections without federal interference. And I often question why that action happened, whether it was just because I think it's a great idea or some other thing.
I know privacy and personal autonomy is a really big deal for libertarians. Can you tell me a bit more about how you believe that action by outgoing Secretary of State Diego Morales sort of violated that?
So, that voter roll that he sent has your last 4 digits of your social, your voting records, if you pulled primary, all those things are attached to that. So what possible need would the federal government have for that other than to kind of target people who didn't vote in a way that they wanted them to vote? They say it's to ensure election integrity, to make sure people who are not citizens are not voting. But, we have checks and balances in place for that already that prevent those kind of actions from happening. Our current Secretary of State has found one individual in the last 4 years or so that voted illegally. So it's a extraordinary solution to a non-existent problem. And so those privacy concerns, I think, are paramount to people in Indiana. And I question why they would do it.
You brought up the ballot access issue. I want to dive into that for just a minute. For our listeners, this came up in our conversation with Greg Ballard as well. In Indiana, in order to appear on a ballot, a party has to get at least 2% of the vote in the Secretary of State's race. Now, for example, in the Libertarians' case, Jeff Moore ran 4 years ago. If I remember correctly, he got about 5.7% of
Correct.
the vote.
Yeah.
And you have set a goal of winning at least 10% of the vote, and that would allow the Libertarians to hold a primary under state law. Again, let's recap for our listeners. 2% gets you on the ballot, 10% allows a party to hold primaries. How do you plan to get there?
Well, again, I have had a tremendous response of individuals who are ready and have an appetite for something different, something better in this position. And I can't tell you the amount of people who are dissatisfied with their current candidate in their party from both the left and the right. A lot of people talk about independence, but it is not so much an independent that's undefined. We have Greg Ballard, who's come on as part of the Lincoln Party. He says, I'm an independent, but he's not. He's now a chairman of like a Lincoln Party. What does that mean? What do they stand for? What are their ultimate goals other than let's just run people? So what do you mean by that? I just find it really interesting that in this race, I think it could be anybody's game because there's so many people interested in something different and something better that serve the people.
Does Greg Ballard's presence on the ballot potentially jeopardize your goal? Because this is now going to be a four-way race.
Well, if you think about it, anybody can win this race with 26%, which is not a hard level to beat with a split Republican base and a Democratic candidate who's come in on a family name and an independent that nobody knows what they stand for. So people in Indiana, as I said, are very eager to have someone who represents them. As a libertarian, I'm always eager to have good, competent candidates on the ballot. And Greg Ballard's race brings to light I would say, the hurdles that you have to do in order to get on the ballot in Indiana, and that struggle and why this race is so important for libertarians.
There's been polling on attitudes toward independent and third-party candidates, and a recent poll found that one of the overarching motivations for voters these days is to keep the other party off of the levers of power, and that ends up overriding anything else, and that is one of the things that disincentivizes voters from voting for independent or third-party candidates, is feeling that, well, if I vote for this third party, then this other one of the primary two major parties that I don't like, whichever one it is I don't like, becomes the party in power. How often does that come up in your interactions with voters, and how do you cut through that?
So, that's kind of a false narrative because you earn votes. And if they aren't earning the votes, maybe they should run better candidates. In that line, I've had people say, well, if I vote for you, then so-and-so is going to win. I'm like, and I can flip that and say the exact same thing. If you vote for a Democrat or Republican, then the Libertarian's not going to win. So how does that make truth when you say it that way, right? It's really interesting. I have conversations with everybody at these tabling events for the last year and a half that I've been campaigning. And oftentimes they'll say, I agree with what you're telling me. I think I'm going to vote for you. But changing minds sometimes is different than changing habits in the voting booth. I just want people to know that what you do in the voting booth is your own business. And, some people feel like they have peer pressure to vote a certain way. And I want them to truly vote their values and not because someone said they should vote a certain way.
We're recording this interview in the middle of August. We've got a little less than 3 months now until Election Day. Between now and then, how do you compete with three candidates who all have access to vast sums of money, vast donor networks?
Well, we do run a very lean digital campaign. Grassroots efforts is grassroots efforts. Again, I'm responsible to the people of Indiana, not to mega donors or PACs. And I'm going out and talking to people all over the state. We are doing the groundwork with the people that I have and the volunteers who are just really outstanding, who help arrange events for me and have it ready to go so that the candidate can come and talk for 4 hours and meet with voters. And then we have multiple opportunities to talk to people at local areas like county fairs, farmers markets, the people who really are making decisions at their local area. So I love having that opportunity.
Lauri Shillings is the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for staying with us for this 4-part series. If you would like to hear all the candidates for Secretary of State, you can find my interviews with all 4 of them on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Thank you for listening.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.